Picture this.
If you watch a troop of lemurs, you'll quickly realize they share one universal fear: the sky. At any given moment, the entire group will suddenly freeze. They drop their food, they stop moving, and they stare up in absolute panic. They scramble for the trees, hiding from a flying predator that's about to swoop down and kill them. But if you look up, there is nothing there. And not just in that moment. There is literally no bird on their entire island big enough to actually hunt them. They are running for their lives from a monster that does not exist.
So why are these animals completely terrified of an empty sky?
Obviously, when researchers first noticed this, they didn't just assume the lemurs were hallucinating. They actually had to test it to prove the lemurs weren't just reacting to random noises, getting spooked by the wind, or just having a collective mental breakdown. So, scientists set up experiments. They hid speakers in the brush around lemur enclosures and played generic raptor calls. They also rigged up zip lines and literally dragged cardboard silhouettes of birds over the lemurs' heads. The results were completely undeniable. When the lemurs saw the silhouette of a bird or heard the screech of a raptor, they instantly went into full lockdown mode. Lemurs actually have different alarm calls for different types of danger, and the researchers recorded them using their exact aerial predator vocalization. They were communicating a very specific message to the rest of the group: death from above. And no, the cardboard experiments proved that this wasn't just some learned behavior from a couple of lemurs having a bad experience. They're born already knowing that they need to watch the sky, which naturally leads to a pretty glaring problem. Doesn't Madagascar have predators today? Yes, it absolutely does. But none of them explain this behavior. The most famous predator on the island is the fossa, and the fossa is definitely dangerous to lemurs. But the fossa is a mammal. It hunts on the ground and climbs up into the trees. It doesn't dive bomb out of the clouds. And because of this, the lemurs have a completely different alarm call and a completely different evasion tactic for the fossa. When a fossa is around, lemurs climb higher into the thin branches where the heavier fossa can't reach them. But when a bird is around, they do the exact opposite. They drop down into the dense thickets to break the bird's line of sight. So what about the birds that actually live there right now? Well, Madagascar does have birds of prey, like the Madagascar harrier hawk. But the harrier hawk weighs about 1.5 pounds. A fully grown ring-tailed lemur weighs around 5 to 6 pounds. An adult lemur reacting to a Madagascar harrier hawk is basically like a grown human hiding under the table from a house cat. Sure, it might scratch you, but it's certainly not going to carry you away and eat you, unless it's been hitting the gym, which it hasn't. So if the birds are harmless to the adults, why are the lemurs wasting so much energy screaming at them? This extreme paranoia is actually highly unusual from an evolutionary standpoint. In nature, fear is expensive. Constantly panicking, screaming, and sprinting for your life burns a massive amount of calories. And every minute a lemur spends hiding in a bush staring at the sky is a minute it's not foraging for food, or resting, or mating. Animals that waste energy on false alarms usually, well, die. If they're constantly burning calories reacting to fake threats, they're just going to burn out and get outcompeted by the animals that are actually just relaxing and eating. If a threat isn't real, natural selection usually edits that fear out of the species pretty quickly. But the lemurs haven't lost this fear. They're still burning calories hiding from shadows, which means, at some point in their history, this extreme paranoia was the only thing keeping them alive. The threat was real. The predators did exist, and they were absolutely massive. Madagascar used to be home to a creature known as the Malagasy crowned eagle. This was a giant bird of prey, with a wingspan stretching over 6 feet, equipped with talons that looked like this. So yeah, if you couldn't already guess, anyone getting grabbed by those is going to get absolutely shredded. Imagine a bald eagle, but built like a Thanksgiving turkey. A very angry turkey. This eagle was easily large enough to snatch a fully grown adult lemur right off a branch. When you look at the fossil record, everything about the lemur's paranoid behavior suddenly makes perfect sense. They aren't terrified of the little 1-pound hawks flying around today. They're terrified of the 6-foot monster that used to patrol the skies. And this eagle was specifically built to make the lemurs' lives a living hell. The Malagasy crowned eagle was basically built entirely to hunt primates. Hunting in a jungle canopy is incredibly difficult for a large bird. You can't just soar in open circles and dive 1,000 feet like a falcon in the desert. There are branches, vines, and leaves everywhere. So, the eagle had to rely on pure explosive power. It would likely perch silently in the upper canopy, waiting for a group of lemurs to start foraging. And when one got just a little too far from the thick cover, the eagle would drop. When a bird that massive hits you from above, the impact alone is enough to break bones, and the talons do the rest. Which, if you couldn't tell, is a pretty terrible way to go. Because of this hunting style, the lemurs never had the luxury of a warning. You don't get a long chase sequence. It's either you spot the shadow and dive into the bushes instantly, or you die. Their extreme sky paranoia was literally the only way they survived this constant threat. If a lemur hesitated for even a single second to double check if the shadow was actually an eagle, it got eaten. But the sky wasn't the only place hiding extinct monsters. Madagascar used to be an absolute nightmare for lemurs. While the modern fossa is definitely a threat, it tops out at around 20 pounds. It's essentially the size of a large house cat. But thousands of years ago, the island was home to the giant fossa, and the giant fossa weighed closer to 45 pounds. It was essentially the size of a cougar.
So, yeah, not a house cat.
This means the lemurs were trapped in an environment where the ground and the lower trees were being stalked by cougar-sized predators, and the upper canopy was being patrolled by giant eagles. Lemurs today are basically holding on to instincts from a world that was way more dangerous than the one they live in now. So if these monsters are gone, why haven't the lemurs realised it yet? The reason lemurs are still acting like they're being hunted by giant eagles is simply because the eagles really haven't been gone for that long. When we talk about extinct monsters, we usually think about dinosaurs or things that died out millions of years ago. But the Malagasy crowned eagle and the giant fossa didn't die out millions of years ago. They went extinct only about 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, which, in evolutionary terms, is basically yesterday. And if you know anything about the history of Madagascar, you know exactly what else happened around 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. Humans arrived on the island. Early human settlers drastically changed the environment, clearing forests for agriculture and hunting the native wildlife. The giant predators, which required massive territories and a lot of food to survive, simply couldn't adapt to the sudden loss of habitat and the competition from humans. They collapsed and went extinct. But 1,000 years honestly isn't even that much time when it comes to genetics. In biology, this phenomenon actually has a name. It's called the ghost of predators past. Evolution is incredibly slow. When an environment changes slowly over millions of years, animals have time to adapt. But when an apex predator just completely vanishes overnight, which is essentially what happened when humans arrived, the prey animals are left completely in the dark. The lemurs simply hadn't had enough generations to forget the giant eagle. Their DNA still carries the exact same survival instructions that it did 2,000 years ago, so they continue to act as if the eagle is still up there, hiding in the sun, waiting for the drop on them. But if the lemurs have been staring at tiny, harmless birds for 1,000 years, why can't they just look at the size of a modern hawk and realise they're safe? Well, when a lemur sees the silhouette of a raptor, they aren't exactly stopping to do the math on the bird's wingspan. That visual information skips the logical part of their brain entirely. The visual trigger goes straight to the amygdala, the fear centre of the brain. It triggers an immediate physical reaction. In the wild, taking a few seconds to figure out exactly what kind of bird is diving at you means you're probably going to get eaten. It's always safer to overreact to a false alarm than to underreact to a real threat. If you run away from a harmless pigeon, you lose a few calories. If you ignore an eagle because you thought it was a pigeon, you lose your life. So the lemurs don't think. They just run.
And honestly, I'd make the exact same decision.
But believe it or not, this blind panic is actually saving lives today. Because while an adult lemur won't get carried off by a modern Madagascar harrier hawk, they aren't the only ones in the troop. Infant lemurs are tiny, and a modern hawk is absolutely capable of swooping down and snatching a baby lemur right off its mother's back. So even though the adult lemurs are basically just panicking over nothing, this massive overreaction actually does one thing right. It keeps their babies safe. When the adults scream and dive into the bushes, the babies are carried into the bushes with them, mostly because they're literally clinging to their mothers for dear life, but hey, a win is a win. Because this leftover instinct is still keeping the infants alive, the trait just sticks around. The adults are running from a ghost, but in doing so, they're protecting their offspring from a very real threat. So what would happen if the ghost they're running from suddenly became real again? If we could somehow clone the Malagasy crowned eagle, or reintroduce a similarly massive bird of prey to Madagascar today, would the lemurs just be completely wiped out? Actually, no. They'd likely survive just fine. Because they haven't lost their fear, their defense mechanisms are completely intact. If a giant eagle suddenly appeared in the canopy tomorrow, the lemurs wouldn't have to relearn how to hide. They would have to suffer through thousands of years of heavy casualties while evolution slowly built up a new alarm system. They are already doing the exact behaviours required to survive. They're perfectly prepared for a threat that ended a millennium ago. But Madagascar isn't the only place where evolution forgot to hit the update button. And if you've been watching Beyond the Green for a while, you probably know that nature loves to repeat its weirdest tricks. The ghost of the predator's past is actually a surprisingly common phenomenon all over the world. Take the pronghorn antelope in North America. The pronghorn is famously fast. It can reach speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, and it can sustain that speed for miles. It is the second largest land animal on the planet, right behind the cheetah. But if you look at the predators that actually live in North America today, like wolves or coyotes, they top out at around 40 miles per hour. The pronghorn is completely humiliating them. And maintaining a body built for 60 miles per hour requires huge lungs and a huge heart. It requires massive amount of calories just to keep that engine running. So why is it so fast? Because 10,000 years ago, North America was home to the American cheetah. The pronghorn evolved to outrun a predator that could match its speed. The cheetah went extinct, but the pronghorn never slowed down. It's still burning energy to outrun a ghost. But you don't even need legs to be haunted by a ghost. This phenomenon affects the plant kingdom too. Take the avocado. In nature, fruit is essentially just a tasty bribe. A plant wraps its seed in high-calorie flesh so that an animal will eat it, walk a few miles, and then poop the seed out, planting it in a new location with a nice pile of fertilizer. Gross? Yes. Effective? Also yes. But if you look at an avocado, the seed is absolutely massive. It's the size of a golf ball. No modern animal in the avocado's native habitat of Central America is capable of swallowing an avocado whole and passing that massive seed through its digestive tract. And honestly, I don't even want to imagine an animal trying. If an animal just eats the flesh and drops the seed right under the parent tree, the new sprout will be shaded out and die. So who was the avocado built for? Giant ground sloths. Thousands of years ago, multi-ton ground sloths would eat avocados whole and disperse the seeds across the continent. When the giant sloths went extinct, the avocado was suddenly left with a massive seed that nothing could eat. Without humans stepping in and planting them, avocados probably would have just died out shortly after sloths did, simply because the only thing big enough to actually eat them disappeared. So what happens when the fear finally does fade? Eventually, if enough thousands of years pass, the lemurs will lose this fear. We know this because we have seen what happens to animals on isolated islands that are left without predators for millions of years. They experience a phenomenon known as island tameness. The most famous example is the dodo bird. The dodo lived on the island of Mauritius, which had absolutely zero natural predators. Over millions of years, the dodo completely lost its ability to fly, and more importantly, it completely lost its fear response. When humans finally arrived on Mauritius, the dodos literally just walked right up to the sailors because their genetic code no longer contained the concept of a predator. And obviously, that didn't work out very well for the dodo. Spoiler alert, they're all dead. If Madagascar remains free of giant eagles for another million years, the lemurs will eventually stop looking up. The relaxed lemurs will finally outcompete the paranoid ones. But for the lemurs, this leftover fear is actually distracting them from the real problem. They're spending a massive amount of their time, energy, and stress constantly looking up at the sky, terrified of a bird that literally doesn't exist anymore. And while they all have their attention focused on the clouds, the greatest threat to their survival is happening right on the ground around them. Humans and rapid deforestation are currently destroying the lemur's habitat at an unprecedented rate. The forests they rely on to hide from eagles are being cut down and burned for agriculture. They're perfectly adapted to survive a giant predator, but they have absolutely zero defense against a chainsaw. So the next time you see a lemur frantically scanning the sky, just remember, they aren't crazy. They're just surviving the only way they know how. It's just a shame they're looking in the wrong direction. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching. If there's another weird animal topic you want me to cover next, definitely let me know in the comments because I do actually read them. And if you want to keep going and see another video like this one, check it out here.